So I was trying to remember why we didn't have class last week, and the answer is we had Thanksgiving. So let's do a little recap. We are now reading this Shabbat, the 8th Torah portion of the year. The book of Genesis, Bereshit, the opening book of the Torah, is the longest book of the Torah. It has 12 Torah portions, okay? And so far we've heard Bereshit, creation, the expulsion from Gan Eden, Cain and Abel, brother killing brother. Hashem is, quote-unquote, depressed about the violence of humanity. The next parsha, Noach, is a righteous man, but is self-enclosed only with his family. And then in the third parsha, we have the emergence of Abraham and Sarah, who receives a cosmic mission from Hashem to establish monotheism and Judaism. This continues in the portion of Vayishlach with the binding of Isaac. And then parashat Toldot, we have, Chayei Sarah, we have the passing of Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah. And then Toldot, Jacob and Esau, and the rivalry between the two. And then last week, we weren't here, it was Thanksgiving. We had the story of Jacob escaping from his home, running from his life, from his brother. And on the road, as he escapes, he has this enigmatic dream about a ladder connecting heaven and earth, with angels, divine beings, going up and forth the ladder. And really this dream is about the spiritual essence of Judaism. First of all, Jacob's reaction to the dream is very interesting. Jacob says, wow, behold, yesh Elokim b'makom hazeh. There is God, God's presence is pervasive in this place, and I did not know. What did Jacob not know? Before that, he spent his life in yeshiva, learning Torah in the tent. For him, Torah was an intellectual thing. You study Torah at home, and then you practice Judaism. But what the dream, the revelation of the ladder conveys, is that Judaism is the ladder, the unifier, the connector between heaven and earth, between the physical and the spiritual. I eat and I say bracha. The bracha is the ladder that connects my consciousness to God while I'm eating. Eating is a very physical act. By saying the bracha, I am connecting the energy of the food to the spiritual realm of reality. So the angels going up and down the ladder is really the way a Jewish person lives. Wakes up in the morning, prays, goes to work. At work, wants to have a cup of coffee, saying the bracha. The whole point in Judaism is to connect heaven and earth. Then Jacob comes to Aram, to Haran, which is where his uncle Lavan lives. He falls in love with his daughter Rachel. Lavan tricks him, and instead of marrying him after 7 years worth of labor to Rachel, whom he loves, he finds out that the veiled bride is Leah. And then it's very interesting. Jacob tells him, why did you do this to me? And Lavan's answer is, Lo ya'aseh chen bimkomotenu. In our neck of the woods here, we don't do this business of marrying off the young one before the old one. So some commentators say that what we have here at work is the rabbinic principle of midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Yaakov, in a sense, tricked his father, right? His father couldn't see that it wasn't him, so he got the headway even though he's second born. The same thing happens here. He is tricked, right? Because the bride is veiled.
So he gets a taste of his own medicine.
Exactly. So in Hebrew, the rabbis call it midah keneged midah, which means measure for measure, tit for tat. And then he is He has to work 7 more years so that he can marry Rachel. And then he acquires a fortune while he works for his uncle Lavan, and he has his 12 sons and his daughter. His 12 sons are Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, and Zvulun. And Yosef, but not Binyamin. Binyamin is going to be born in this week's parasha. And Dinah was the girl.
Benjamin is not part of the 12 tribes.
Who, Binyamin?
Yeah.
No, he is.
I mean, he's part, but he's not a tribe in itself.
Oh, right.
Right? Each of the brothers had the 12.
Well, Yosef is not. Yosef, instead of being a tribe, his 2 sons, Ephraim and Menashe, became tribes. And then you take out the tribe of Levi, you still have 12. So there isn't a tribe of Yosef. There's Ephraim and Menashe instead. And towards the end of the Torah portion, Hashem appears before Jacob and he tells him it's time to go back home to Israel. And Lavan, his uncle, chases him and says, "Why are you going?" without saying goodbye. And Jacob tells him, "You have been exploiting me for so many years, and basically I've had enough, and I'm going back home." And now we're going to start this week's parashat, Vayishlach, which means "and he sent," because Jacob is going to send emissaries to his brother Esav, because he's going back to Israel, and inevitably he's going to run through his brother Esav. So we're going to see what happens. This is
Right.
Yeah, this was the. This is where we are right now. I'm going to give us the handouts. Here, we're going to use this because this has Rashi. Okay?
Rabbi,
Yes.
why did Yaakov did not find out about his wife until after they slept?
I'm not
In
sure
our
I understand.
tradition- In
Oh.
our tradition, we make sure.
Well, we make sure today because
Based on what happened to
Yeah.
Jacob.
Based on what
based on that, right? Right. So it's like they say, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." Right? I once saw a YouTube clip with President George W. and he was giving a public exposition, and he said this. He said, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, you just can't fool me." Anyway, so here we are, parashat Vayishlach, and let's start. So Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv. So Yaakov sent malachim can mean 2 things. It could mean emissaries, messengers, UPS employees, or it could mean angels, divine beings. So Yaakov sent malachim towards Esav, his brother, to the land of Seir, the field of Edom. That's where Esav was living. Rashi says, you see where it says Jacob sent angels below? Yeah, that's Rashi's commentary. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim mamash. So Yaakov sent angels, spiritual angels, not flesh and blood messengers. Verse 2. Vayitzav otam le'emor. So this is what Jacob commanded these angels, divine beings and or emissaries, to say. Kotomrun le'adoni le'esav. This you shall say to my master, to Esav. Does something struck you here in the formulation? What strikes you?
That he's calling his brother.
He's calling him my master.
Because he knows he's supposed to be the blessed one.
Right. So he's trying to appease him. He's trying to be lowly before his brother. He's trying to appeal to his ego, if you like. This you shall say to my master, to Esav. Ko amar avdecha Yaakov. Thus spoke your servant Yaakov. I am your servant, right? It's like in the old days when Britain was an empire, the public servants used to sign their letters, I am, madam or sir, your obedient servant. They used to write this in English. Instead of like all the best or sincerely, I am, sir, your obedient servant. So it's a very old way of speaking. I can't, it's unbelievable. I remember once I was at the museum of the Irgun, one of the Jewish underground movements in Israel before independence, the one that Menachem Begin led. And I went to the museum, and they showed there letters, a letter that a mother of one of the Irgun members wrote to the British High Commissioner not to execute her son, who was going to be sent to the gallows under the British mandate. And the High Commissioner writes her back that they are not going to commute the sentence, and her son is going to be executed. And he actually signs it, I am, madam, your obedient servant. I mean, it's such an absurd, right? You're telling someone, I'm going to execute your child, but I am your obedient servant. It's kind of crazy, yeah. Bureaucratic absurdities. So thus spoke your servant Jacob. Im Lavan garti, I have lived with Lavan. Va'echar ad ata, and I've been late until now. So why does he say, I lived with Lavan? In Hebrew, the word is garti. There are two words you can use in Hebrew to say you live somewhere. One is darti, with a daled, which means I became a permanent citizen. And one is garti, from the word ger. A ger is a stranger. So what he's saying, I was a stranger there. I lived there, but I didn't really acclimate there. I didn't become a VIP there. I didn't become, I was just living there. Another thing is that the word garti in Hebrew has the letters Gimel, Reish, Taf, Yud, which is the same letters as the word Taryag. What is Taryag mitzvot? Anybody knows? Taryag is 613. So I still fulfilled the 613 mitzvot. In other words, I remained steadfast in my Judaism, and all my children were still connected to the Jewish faith, even though I lived in a place where there was no other avenues to pursue Judaism, and it was a very decadent place. So he's sending two messages. One is, don't be so jealous. I just lived there. I didn't become such a big person, and I didn't build a $20 million home. And secondly, I'm a strong person, right? You have to be really strong to maintain your Judaism in an utterly non-Jewish environment. So there are two components to this message. Verse 6. So, I did amass some wealth back then in an agrarian society. I have all kinds of animals in my possession and maidservants, and I'd like to send them to find favor in your eyes. He wants to shower him with gifts, right? Kill him with kindness. Verse 7, back of the page. Vayashuvu amalachim el Yaakov le'emor, and the messengers, the angels, went back to Jacob saying, le'emor, banu el achicha el Esav, we went to your brother Esav, vegam holech likratecha. Guess what? He's heading towards you, ve'arba meot ish imo, and there are 400 people with him, carrying Uzis and Kalashnikovs. And
this is verse 6 or 7?
Verse 7.
7.
Now notice this. What's Jacob's reaction when he hears that his brother is approaching him with 400 men?
Right.
Vayira Yaakov me'od vayetzer lo. Vayetzer lo. So Yaakov was afraid and he was distressed. Vayachatz et ha'am, and he split his camp into two. את הצאן ואת הבקר ואת הגמלים לשני מחנות, into two camps. So first of all, what is this idea? You know, there is a rabbinic principle that nothing is superfluous in the Torah. So it says here that Yaakov was afraid and he was distressed. What's the difference between being afraid and being distressed? What do you think was going on here? Why doesn't the Torah say only and Yaakov was afraid? Why does it say he was afraid and he was distressed?
Because he was angry in some ways about it, wasn't he?
He's carrying the guilt.
Okay, so one way...
That he misstated his brother. So he's distressed about that. That's how I see it.
Okay, so let's see what Rashi says. Do you see the Rashi where it says Jacob at the very bottom of the page? Jacob became frightened and distressed. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to read that Rashi, Eli, in English?
Jacob became frightened and distressed. He was frightened lest he killed.
You skip the brackets.
Tenkuma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Skip the parentheses too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Lest he killed and he distressed that he might kill others.
So he was frightened. Vayira Shemer. He was afraid that he might get killed, and he was distressed that he might kill others. So do you want to explain in your own words what was he afraid about and what was he distressed about?
His family.
He was afraid that he might get killed. You go to war, you might not come back.
Yeah.
He was afraid to die. But what was he distressed about? That he might kill others. That's very Jewish. What does Israel do before it bombs and targets terrorists in a certain neighborhood in Gaza? It calls the residents. Israel drops leaflets from the skies. Get out of here. Right? That's, Hitler once said, Yimach Shmo, that conscience is a Jewish invention. And he was right. He hated Jews because Jews represented Judaism. And Judaism represents justice, truthfulness, love, peace, human dignity. We're all in God's image. So Yaakov has a conscience. He's not a warmonger. He's not thirsting for war. It's not that he's only afraid for himself. The very fact that he has to go to war and knows that others are going to die too, that's a source of sadness for him.
Yeah.
That's very Jewish, right? That's very Jewish. Okay. Let's go to verse 9, the next page. Vayomer, and Yaakov says, Im yavo Esav el hamachane ha'achat v'yikaru v'haya machane hanishar lifleta. Now Yaakov split his camp into two parts, right? So that's his reasoning. If Esav is going to go attack one camp, the other camp that's in a different location will survive. Right? Now here, what does Rashi do in the next verse? Verse 10. Vayomer Yaakov Elokei avi Avraham ve'Elokei avi Yitzchak Hashem haomer elai shuv la'artzecha v'moladtecha v'timech. He addresses God, right? He says, Jacob said, the God of my father and my grandfather and my father who tells me to return. He's appealing to God, right? What is it called when you appeal to God? Prayer. So what are the three things that Yaakov does as he's about to have a showdown with his brother Esav?
He prays.
The first, here he prays. Before that, what did he do? He divided his camp into two. He prepared for war. And before that, he sent a message to Esav that he has lots of possessions and he wants to share it with Esav. So really, we have four things going on, if you like. How does he prepare for the
situation?
Gifts,
Gifts,
prayer, diplomacy, dividing the camp into two,
That's tactic.
and preparing for war. Right? So that's really the way, what we see here through Yaakov's showdown with Esav is the Jewish blueprint for generations to come, how to survive in exile. We have to maintain our spiritual connection with God, right? That's prayer. We had to be useful, beneficial citizens to shower the hosting nations with gifts, right? And be skillful at diplomacy. Correct?
Gifts is part of the diplomacy, right?
Right. But also you can look at it as the Jewish way to always be a gift to the nations around it. Wherever Jews dwell, they seek to be good, contributing citizens, right? And we are. We've always been. So we've said, gifts is to be good citizens wherever we are. And it's also diplomacy, like you said. Prayer is maintaining our connection with Hashem. Preparing for war, that's Zionism. That's modern day Zionism. It's the idea that we're going to take our fate and destiny into our own hands, and we're going to fight to protect ourselves. Right? You have all of Jewish history here. And lastly, he splits his camp into two. If you look at Jewish history, ever since the destruction of the first temple in the year 587 BCE, 2,700 years ago, Cyrus the Great invited us to go back to build the second temple. Okay? How many Jews came back from Babylonia to Israel to build the second temple? Most of them stayed in America, in Babylonia. It's the same thing. We've had, throughout our entire history, we've always had two main Jewish centers. It was, hi, welcome. It was Babylonia and Israel. And later on it was Spain and North Africa. Right? Today it's what? Today it's what?
Israel and America.
Israel and America, right? So we see...
America's Babylon.
So we see, well, it's the empire of the time.
Babylon is
We always go to where
right?
the action is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we always go to where the action is. So we see that this encounter between Yaakov and Esav is a blueprint for Jewish history for thousands of years to come.
So the splitting of the camp is when we had our exodus to assure survival.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Two camps to ensure survival.
So it's very cool, right? The Jacob's moves are our moves. Okay. Now,
Excuse me, Rabbi,
yes.
is there a sense of priority in here that goes like prayer first and then diplomacy and give gifts and then if none of those works, get ready for war? Is the priority goes in a certain way?
Well, let's see. First, he offers gifts, right? Let's look at it.
Did he say-
No, first he stayed connected. No? Or no?
First, he what?
He stayed connected with God, with prayer.
Yeah, he's connected to God all the time. That's a given.
Okay.
And then he sends the messengers saying, I want to, he's reaching out peacefully. It's a little bit, reminds me like before the 6-Day War broke out. Abba Eban was Israel's foreign minister. And he traveled to London, to Paris, to Washington, D.C., and he tried to advocate to solve it diplomatically. Right? The first thing is diplomacy. Right? But yeah, the spiritual is a given, that we maintain our spiritual connection to Hashem. And then he splits his camp into two. And and prayer also. So we have here the blueprint for thousands of years to come. Now, on the next back of the page, where it says at the bottom left, 4 of 43. 4 of 43. Verse 11. It says, Katonti mikol hachasadim. It's very beautiful. Jacob is saying to Hashem, I am belittled from all the chasadim, all the acts of loving kindness and all the truthfulness which you have showered upon me.
What's katonti? What is that?
It means I am belittled. I am belittled by all your acts of loving kindness and all the truth that you have done towards me. For with my staff I crossed the Jordan. I made Michael Jordan upset. I crossed the Jordan. And now I became two camps.
You blocked him.
In other words, it's a very interesting move, because Yaakov is at a very dangerous point, and instead of saying first thing, save me from my brother, he's taking a step back and saying, wow, look, I came here from Greece, I came here from Iran, I came here from Cuba with nothing, and I have all this now. Thank God. I came here with nothing, with one suitcase, with a staff. I crossed the Jordan, and look what I have now. I have such a big family that I need to split it into two. Baruch Hashem. So the first thing is he thinks about all the blessings, and he's saying, oh my God, I'm so blessed. Will I merit more blessings? Isn't that enough? Right? It's a very interesting approach. He's not saying, oh, I'm so blessed, I want more. I'm saying, wow, God has blessed me with so much. Maybe I'm not going to get any more because I've already received so much. And only then does he say on verse 12, Hatzilen, save me please from the might of my brother Esav, because I'm afraid of him, lest he appears before me and smites me, hits me, a mother upon her children. In other words, a pogrom, a massacre, a genocide. He's going to kill the mother with her children. So he knows who he's dealing with. He's understanding, and again, it's prophetic. The whole book of Bereshit, according to Nachmanides, which was a great Spanish Kabbalist, is Sefer Simanim. It's the book of omens, meaning everything, much of what we read in Genesis is an omen for things, historical patterns that will reiterate themselves time and again throughout the millennia, tumultuous millennia of Jewish history. You understand? So here, he knows that the Jewish people face enemies that sometimes have no qualms about massacring women and children and the elderly and the innocent, right? He knows what he's facing. In verse 13, and Yaakov says, I know that you told me, Heitev eitiv imach, I will be beneficent towards you, and your descendants will be as numerous as the sand upon the sea that is incalculable, you cannot count. And that's, of course...
Can I question something?
Yes, please.
Obviously, we receive of the blessing of multiplying and our seed will...
Mm-hmm.
How come we're such few people? Have we ever given any thought about that?
Well,
I know.
why do you think we're so small? Well, there are a lot of explanations to it. Well, first of all, through Judaism, Christianity and Islam came to the world. So if you look at it this way, then the followers of monotheism is most of humanity today.
That's correct.
Billions. There are 1 billion Catholics alone.
1 billion?
Catholics, just Catholics. and over 1 billion Muslims. So, and 13 million Jews, most of which are in this room as we speak. But, in the ancient world, around the 1st century, I think there were about 14 million pagans and 4 million Jews. And here we are 2,000 years later, and there are 13 million Jews. What happened? Many assimilated of their own accord, and many were murdered. Now,
We still haven't recovered from World War II in population.
So,
Do you really think that is the reason? Because let's think about that.
do the math. If we were 4 million 2,000 years ago, we should have been...
Right. Millions.
Right. So, a lot of Jews assimilated, just like today. 71%.
But we also don't have children irresponsibly. Like
Right.
Catholics use the excuse of no birth control, but they don't think about the premarital sex part. So they remember they're Catholic only later, and then they have a lot of kids without responsibility.
We shouldn't be using birth control in our faith just as well as the Catholics,
Well, it depends which route do you go. The halacha is actually that ideally a person wants to try and have one of each gender, one boy and one girl.
Then you need to keep trying.
That's really the halacha.
Okay.
And once a person has a boy and a girl, people want to have more children, God bless them. But the halacha is to try and have one of each, by the way.
Birth control is...
It's permitted in some quarters, not in all quarters, But I'm telling you what the halacha is.
But you see, we're responsible as people. We take care of ourselves. We want to educate our children. We don't just willy-nilly have kids whether we can afford it or not.
Exactly.
And I think that's huge.
So, statistics show us, modern-day statistics,
You didn't say anything wrong.
that, just hear this, statistics say that the higher a person's socioeconomic status is, the more income a person has, the wealthier a person is, and the more education a person has, the less children
The
they
fewer
have.
kids they have, yes.
And Jews are, American Jews are part of the elite, both in terms of income and an education level.
Yep.
So we are actually, I think, the smallest group in America in terms of our birth rate.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then the next part shows us an inventory, if you like, of the different gifts that Esav presents to his brother: stocks, commodities, securities, bonds, cash, you name it. Goats and cows and donkeys and this and that. It gives you a specification. And he gives them instruction. Each part of the party, he says, whenever you get to Esav, say that it's from your brother Yaakov, and there's more coming. There's more coming. Now we're in verse 23. At the bottom it says 7 out of 43. The bottom left side of the page. Okay?
Verse 23, you're saying?
Yes, at the bottom.
Yeah, let's do 22. V'ta'avor ha'mincha al panav, and all those gifts passed by Jacob, ve'hulan balayla hu b'machane, and he slept that night in the camp. It was the Holiday Inn. 23. Vayakom balayla hu, he woke up that night. He woke up that night. Vayikach et shtei nashav, and he took his 2 wives and his 2 maidservants. Who were his maidservants? Bilhah and Zilpah. And they gave birth to some of the children. Okay?
Bilhah and Zilpah?
Yeah. I believe Zilpah was Leah's maidservant, and Bilhah was Rachel's.
Bilhah was Rachel,
Yeah.
and this was Leah's. Okay.
Right. Ve'et achad asar yeladav. and his 11 children. Right?
Wow.
Who has the 11 children? Jacob?
Yeah. So he wakes up at night after Esav got all the gifts, and he takes his wife and his 2 maidservants and his 11 kids, and he passes the water passage known as Yabok. Okay?
Your book.
You're right. Now, the Torah says 11 children, but by then Jacob had 12 children. He had 11 boys and 1 girl. So Rashi says, Vedina hechanata. Where was Dina? Natna bateva. He put her in one of the chests, right? Vena'al befanea, and he locked it. Shelo iten ba Esav enav. He was afraid that Esav will see her and see how beautiful she is and get the wrong idea.
Wow.
And Rashi says,
Esau was some kind of animal.
but look at the Rashi. It's an amazing Rashi on the back of the page where it says 8 of 43.
Yeah.
Right above verse 24, it says, "Velechach ne'enash Yaakov sheman'a me'achiv shema tachzerenu lamutav." That Jacob
Made a mistake.
was punished for withholding Dinah from his brother Esav, because had Esav married Dinah,
Wait a minute.
She
You would have
wo-
married his niece?
yeah, hold on,
Ugh.
yeah, she would have caused him to improve his ways.
But instead.
But instead, she fell into the hands of Shechem. She's gonna get violated later on in this
that's
parsha.
right. Oh.
So
Oh.
notice how Rashi is criticizing Yaakov here. Isn't that amazing? He's saying Yaakov really shouldn't have done it. There's another amazing commentary like that when Abraham and Sarah expelled Hagar and Ishmael, the Nachmanides said that because of that, for many generations, Jews suffered under the yoke of Islam. Because of the fact that Abraham and Sarah expelled Hagar and Ishmael from their home. Interesting, right? So,
Seems to be, to me, is today's problem.
in some ways, yeah, very interesting, right? I think there's something very powerful that we see our commentators don't shy away sometimes from criticizing our ancestors. It's part of a culture of self-reflection and self-criticism, right? And a culture or a person who cannot engage in self-criticism can't really grow. So I think it's a very powerful thing. Verse 24. Vayikachem. So Jacob took them, his wives, his maidservants, his children. Vayavirem et hanachal. He put them across the stream of water. Vayaver et asher lo, and everything that he possessed. Verse 25. Vayivater Yaakov levado, and Jacob was left alone. He sent all his possessions, and his family, and he remained alone. Vayeavek ish imo, and a man wrestled with him. So this is a little bit of a strange verse, because what does it say? It says that Jacob remained alone and what happened?
Wrestled with a man.
And wrestled with a man. Does that make sense to you?
Actually, the dream that he fell asleep and he had this dream of, but
Maybe
nobody's saying what he's saying.
maybe it was a dream, or it was a spiritual encounter
Of himself.
with himself. Right. What is the name of this passage? Water passage way that he had his family pass through. Look at verse 23. Yabok.
Yabok.
What kind? Look at it in English. Yabok. What kind of letters does it have?
J.
Jacob.
It's like Jacob, right?
Yeah.
So it's like he underwent an internal shift, right? It's like he had a midlife crisis. He had this moment of showdown because it was a very transformational moment in his life, a liminal moment. He grew up sheltered in his father's tent, studying Torah, being a very bookish, indoors, secluded, studious kind of guy. And then he went out to the real world in very traumatic circumstances, and he had to fend for himself and raise a family and deal with the realities of this world, a demeaning boss. And now he's going back home. Right? So he's going through this inner turmoil. There's a short story by James Joyce, the great Irish writer, called Evelyn. And it says that Evelyn, the character, or the heroine of that story, she's going to the port in Dublin and she's thinking about leaving Dublin. And then Joyce writes, all the seas trembled in her heart. All the seas trembled in her heart, you know. There's like a whole storm going on within her. So that's what is happening to Jacob, according to one interpretation. He's having this internal, nocturnal, enigmatic struggle. He's having a moment, a transformative moment in his life. So he remained alone, and a man wrestled with him. According to some, it's that inner struggle within Jacob, ad alot hashachar, until the rise of dawn. In the words of Homer, the great Greek poet, until dawn rose with her rosy fingers to bring daylight to the immortals and to man. Until the rise of dawn. Why did Jacob remain alone? Rashi says something, he wants to give us a teaching here, that he says that he forgot like small bottles or small tzedakah box, and he went back to fetch them. That it's a great thing for, it shows a tzaddik appreciates money. What does it mean? That he's not wasteful. You know what I mean? Even though he was a wealthy man, he didn't think, oh, whatever, leave it there. He had respect for property, because property is hard-earned, right? So he went back to fetch a few items that remained there, which teaches us to respect our property, and not to mention other people's property. And then he has this struggle with the enigmatic being all night long, and from that we have the Hasidic song, all night long. All night. It's from this. Verse 26. Vayar ki lo yacholo. And he saw that he could not prevail him. The enigmatic being saw that he cannot defeat Jacob. So he touched the socket of his hip. Vateka kaf yerech Yaakov be'avko imo. And he dislocated it as he wrestled with Jacob. The enigmatic being, the angelic being, dislocated Jacob's hip. This is really the beginning of WWF in the Torah. Verse 27.
And this is why we can't have filet mignon?
Exactly. Or as I like to say, filet mignon.
Yeah.
Verse 27. So the angel, the spiritual being, starts freaking out. He's saying, I have to go back to the office in the heaven. Vayomer shalcheni ki ala shachar. Let me go. It's almost dawn here. Don Johnson. Vayomer lo ashalechecha ki im birichtani. I will not let you go until you bless me. And this is a huge teaching for life. That we always have opportunity to find blessing in adversity. Yaakov is fearing for his life. He's fearing for his children's life. his wife's lives, everything that he worked for. He goes through a traumatic encounter and says, I'm not going to let go of this encounter. I will not let you go until you bless me. It's a very deep teaching that I learned from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, that it's a teaching for every Jew to find blessing in the most horrific of circumstances. You know.
That's probably how it survived the Holocaust in the concentration camps.
Well,
that's what kept them alive.
Yeah, you know, I'll share with you a couple of short stories of people that I know. When I was in high school, there was somebody a few years older than me that died in a horrific car accident. And he was a speeder, you know, he was known to be somebody who was speeding. And he died with several friends in his car.
And the friends died too?
Oh, were they drinking?
And what happened, what happened is they were speeding, and his mother made it her life's work to go to all the high schools in Tel Aviv where I grew up and to give lectures to the high schoolers. And she showed them a chilling video that they found in the car, how they were looking at the speedometer, is that what it's called?
Uh-huh.
And showing how they got to like over 100 miles per hour on a road. That
and they were having fun with it.
And they were like talking and laughing, and at some point it just goes blank. And they hit a truck. So what did she do? She took the most horrific thing that can happen to a human being. She buried her own child. And she turned it into a blessing in the sense that she found a calling from her tragedy. The way she found strength to keep on living is by teaching other kids from what happened to her son. Similarly, a few years ago when I lived in New Jersey, there was a woman who was connected to the community I served who was diagnosed with lung cancer. And she was a chain smoker all her life. Not to say there are many people who get lung cancer who don't smoke. But what did she do? For the rest of her life that she had, maybe a couple of years, maybe less, she also went to schools to talk with teenagers about not smoking, so that they will see her and see what could happen to them.
There's a woman that I'm friends with who lost her daughter at the age of 20 to ovarian cancer, which at that time, they didn't know that someone that young could even get ovarian cancer.
How old was she?
20.
Wow.
She was diagnosed at 18 and died at 20.
Wow.
And she had ovarian cancer, and she had symptoms that at that time they didn't even recognize could be symptoms of ovarian cancer. And so this woman, her name is, she's a Jewish woman, her name is Robin Bambini. She created the ovarian Cancer Circle, and it's a nonprofit fundraising organization, and she raises a lot of money every year, gives it to UCLA for ovarian cancer research. It's
very powerful.
I mean, she has devoted her life to this, and this was probably, I want to say, close to 20 years ago, and that's all she has done.
It's very common to see when people go through losses, resilient people and smart people and deep people tend to try and do that. You know, when Yoni Netanyahu died, Netanyahu's brother, they set out the Jonathan Institute Against Terrorism. And they got U.S. senators involved, and Gerald Ford was involved, and George Bush Sr. was involved. And Netanyahu himself, Bibi, was this kid. He was like 27 years old. And they started creating this institute to fight terrorism. And that's how he made his name. That's how people started to know him. I'll give you two quick other examples. One is, there was a woman in Israel, I read her book, an American woman who became religious and moved to Israel and settled in Israel in a settlement. And one day during the second Intifada, around 2001, her son skipped school with another kid. And they went to this cave right outside the place where they lived. I think it's the city of Efrat. And they were there in the morning. They skipped school. And there was a there were some Palestinians there who murdered both kids with rocks. They smashed their heads with rocks. That's how they were found. Now, she describes in her book how she basically couldn't live, you know. And then what she did, she established a summer camp called Camp Kobe, because her child's name was Kobe. And this is a
His
summer
last name
camp.
was what? Brian?
And Kobe is a diminutive of Jacob. And
It is?
Yeah, it is. So, at least in Hebrew. So, this summer camp is really an opportunity for all the families who lost kids, you know, to terror attacks, to come together as one big family and have a summer camp in which they all understand each other on the deepest of levels. That's how she found the strength to live. Right?
It's the support group.
Yeah. Of sorts. And lastly, there's an incredible story that I know of an Australian young woman who was a marathon runner in Australia. And she spoke about her once on Kol Nitre night. And she was burnt in a fire. There was a wildfire around the marathon area, and people and the planners thought that the fire is not going to get, but it did get to some competitors, and she was burnt almost completely. And you see the pictures before. She's a very pretty person, and after that, completely burnt. And she dedicates her life to promoting skin transplants in the developing world. Because, you know, in Australia they could do skin transplants and save her life, but that's what she dedicates her life to. The last one I'll tell you, because I think they're all very inspiring. There was a woman in Israel, Lilach Shem Tov, who was she was married to a very violent man, and after they separated, they got divorced. At some point, the social welfare didn't allow him to see the kids because he was violent. At some point, they said, "Okay, you can see the kids," and they sent, and the 3 kids they had were sent to spend Shabbat with their father. So Friday night and Saturday, and he put the kids to sleep, and he murdered all 3 kids. He stabbed them to death. And it was a Saturday. It was also the mother's birthday. He planned it like that.
How could you kill your own kids?
Yeah, it was. It's probably the most horrific thing.
Were they babies?
They were all under 10, I think, or the oldest one may have been 10. So.
Should have been committed.
So the point is that what she did is obviously she collapsed, but after a while, she wrote a book called To Fly with No Wings, like the ability to pick yourself up, and she dedicates her life to working with social welfare in Israel to make sure that things like that don't happen, that people who are violent cannot have custody or cannot spend time with children alone. And she remarried, and in her 40s, she had another child.
Wow.
So this is...
That was a blessing right there.
Right. So this is a big message, right? I will not let you go until you bless me. Right? And you have to go? Okay.
I have to apologize.
Yeah. No, please.
My wife is waiting for me.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Be well.
I'll see you tonight.
I'll see you tonight, God
Have a
willing.
good day.
And let us remember that this idea of I will not let you go until you bless me is a fundamental idea in Jewish history. That in Jewish history, each time we were hit, we got ourselves up. We lost the second temple. We were expelled from Israel in the 2nd century. So we moved to a book-based religion. Instead of being based around the temple in Jerusalem and the sacrifice, now it was about reading the Torah and the prayer books, right? In the Mishnah, and after that the Talmud later on. In the 12th century, the Crusades were massacring a third of European Jewry. After that, the Hasidim of Ashkenaz arose, the German Jewish mystics. 1492, the expulsion from Spain. From that, we have in the 1500s the Kabbalists of Tzfat, the whole idea of Tikkun Olam and all that Kabbalah is later on as a response, as a spiritual response to the expulsion from Spain. 1945, the end of the Holocaust in Auschwitz. 1948, the State of Israel. I will not let you go until you bless me. The darkest, most abysmal moments in Jewish history, in retrospect, we see served as a catalyst for some sort of transformative positivity for our people. Right? So this is really the idea of finding blessings in adversity. Right? Resilience. Did you want to say something earlier? No? You
I
did.
wanted to comment to Eli.
Okay.
When he says, how could a person do that, kill his own children? My son is a deputy DA and in the crime area, and he sees all kinds of horrific things. And my question to him was exactly what we just brought up. And he says, well, Dad, here's your answer. The answer is that you think of killing somebody is a horrific thing. This person doesn't have the same state of mind that you have. He's demented. He's a sick person, a sick mind. Doesn't rationalize like you do. We always think of how can a person do that.
But it's a question, because if we go completely down that route, then if everybody is sick, so no serial killer should be in jail. They should all be in hospital.
That's correct.
And can we hold the Nazis accountable? You know what I mean? If we go down that road that everybody is ill, then we really completely abandon the notion of personal accountability. Right. And that's why we have psychiatrists who assess those people. You know, and some of them are too sick to stand trial. And some of them, according to the medical experts, are responsible.
Right. I mean, there's obviously, call it, as you said, the experts to decide, are you making yourself, are you faking it?
And is it premeditated or not?
Or is it true that you're truly, sick in your mind? But anyway.
If you're sick in your mind, you're a danger to the people around you,
Absolutely.
and you need to be imprisoned.
So, there's a story that the President of the United States learns that the world is going to be flooded in 48 hours. So he summons the Pope, the Chief Rabbi, and the leading Imam, and all the great religious leaders, and tells them to address their respective communities and pray because the end of the world is coming. And they all go and say to their communities, let us, beseech God's mercy because the world is going to be flooded. And the chief rabbi says to the Jewish people, friends, we have 48 hours to figure out how to live underwater.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So what's the blessing that he's going to get? Let's see. The blessing is as following. Verse 28. Vayomer elav ma shimcha, vayomer Yaakov. Shu ismak, which is Arabic for what's your name? And he said, Yaakov, my name is Jake. Vayomer, right. Lo Yaakov yamer ot shimcha, let your name no longer be called Jacob, ki im Israel, but rather you will be known as Israel. Ki sarita im Elokim ve'im anashim vatuchal, because you wrestled with God and with people and prevailed. That's our name, right? Israel. That's the name of the Jewish state. That's the name of the Jewish people, the people of Israel. We are all the children, the descendants of Israel. Now we know that...
Wait, what does Israel actually mean?
The one who struggles with God and with people and prevails.
All in one word?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Israel means the one who dwelled or struggled. Well, that's the way he explains the name. I'm calling you Israel because you're the one who wrestled with God and with people and prevailed. So we know that, in philosophy, when they talk about words, there was a Swiss linguist, Ferdinand de Saussure. He says that there is the word and there is the thing. So, for example, there is the word table. When I say table, then that sound of the word table is a signifier. What does it signify? This table, the physical table. So there's the signifier, table, and there's the signified, this table. And so, in some ways, some cultures, a word is just a signifier. Not in our culture. In our culture, a name of a person and sometimes a place represents a spiritual calling or an essence or a potential, right? In a sense, you could say in today's Buddhist terms, your karma, right? Or your destiny. So now that we think about it, thousands of years later, that this is the name that we were given by the angel. We are the one who struggle with God and with people and prevail. What does that tell you? That that's our name.
Survivors.
We're survivors.
Yeah, we're survivors.
Right. It's also a message about life as struggle. I was thinking to myself the last couple of days. That life is about a struggle. Life inevitably involves struggles.
Didn't Hitler write a book called Mein Kampf, which means the same thing?
It means my battle, I think. There are battles and there are battles, right?
Yeah.
Right. Mahatma Gandhi also led the battle, and so did Dr. King, but for noble things. So the one who also struggles with God, I find that very interesting. The one who struggles with God. We challenge God sometimes, right? Abraham challenged God at Sodom and Gomorrah. Will the judge of the entire earth not act justly? Will God kill the innocent people? King David asks in Tehillim, until when will the wicked rejoice? Jeremiah the prophet asks, how is it that parents eat unripe food and their children's teeth decay? Why is it that parents mess up and their children pay the price? Right?
That's because Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
I thought Jeremy spoke in class today.
Can you elaborate on that, Rabbi? Because I've heard that so much that...
About struggling with God?
No, about our different generations pay for the sins of their forefathers. Is that...
Oh.
Is that
Well,
That's a common saying.
Well, it's just a fact that, I was watching recently the two TV shows about Madoff. One was ABC with Richard Dreyfuss.
Oh, I think I saw that.
Excellent. And the other one, also good, with Robert De Niro as Madoff and Michelle Pfeiffer as his wife.
As his wife. I saw
It's
that
also
too.
good.
Yeah.
And at some point, one of the brothers, they both died,
One
by
of the
the way.
sons.
Both sons, I'm sorry. Andrew and Mark. One of them took his own life. The other one died from cancer after the whole
Yeah.
thing blew up.
Yeah.
So he paid the price.
Yeah.
And his and the
But
grandkids
really,
paid
who
the
paid
price.
the price? Who are you saying paid the price?
The one who took his own
Yeah.
life, the kid.
But who really paid the price?
The grandkids.
No, the father paid
The
price.
father to see his children die.
Oh,
But
okay. But also,
That's who really.
well, I think also.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but the ultimate suffering is a parent seeing their children die.
But okay, my point is
I know what your
that,
point is, but
there's a scene in the show where one of the brothers says to the other, "We're changing our name from Madoff to
Yeah.
Mac
yeah,
because," or take even physical things. Babies of crack addicts are born addicts.
yeah. Or even the
Sometimes-
environment, the things that the
Sometimes-
generations before polluting all over the place.
That's a great example.
And-
Pollution.
And all the
Global
not
warming.
only the global warming, but all the diseases we have now. How much cancer is rampant? Autoimmune diseases running rampant from the abuse of the environment in previous generations.
So whether we like it or not, the actions that we take have
They have
sometimes a
consequences.
direct bearing on the younger generations. It's just a fact, right? So Elie Wiesel once said something many times, but one of the many powerful things he said was, one can be a Jew with God or against God, but not without. Meaning, you're always engaged.
Engaged with God.
It's like
whether
this.
pro or con.
It's like this joke I heard from a wonderful Chabad rabbi of blessed memory, that there's this kid in New York, in Manhattan, on the Upper West Side, that his parents are two Jewish atheists. His father is a psychiatrist and his mother is a French literature professor. And they send him to the Catholic school because it's the best private school in the area. And one day he comes from school and they ask him, "What did you learn today?" And he said, "Well, I learned that God is made of three parts. It's a trinity. There's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." So the father tells him, "You listen to me, son. There is only one God, and we don't believe in him." So that's the idea of
That
being
wraps it up right there.
being with God or against God, but not without. There's a story of the late Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach. Have you heard about Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach? He composed many tunes, including Lecha Dodi Li. He was a great composer, and he went around college campuses trying to get the young people re-engaged with the tradition. So he said, "This is what I learned after all these years going to college campuses as a traveling rabbi. I walk to someone and ask him, 'What religion are you?' He says, 'I'm Catholic.' I know he's a Catholic. If he tells me I'm a Protestant, I know he's a Protestant. If he tells me I'm just a human being, I know he's a Jew."
I would have to excuse myself.
All right.
I have to
All right.
myself too.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rabbi.
Thank you.